Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Cricket Podcast. This is going to be episode 5, and I am joined as always by Azza. I'm Nick, as you're all well aware by now. Azza, Test Cricket's back. I'm excited.
I am too, Nick. And it's the big two out of the big three we're playing. So it should
Well,
be should be fun.
it's the big two that growing up has always caused family feuds between my mother and I. Not talking to each other for days depending on the result. No doubt our friendship will endure no matter the result at the end of the series, Azza.
I certainly hope the podcast endures.
Oh, you know what? If we can get a few cheeky sponsors, some shares, some subscribes, that
Yeah.
might all help us. That might all help us survive the end of this series for sure.
That's true.
Some important news before we start off. Ben Stokes is taking an indefinite leave from cricket. We wish him all the best. I think you and I both know, as many around the world do, that focusing on your mental health is really important. So for Ben Stokes, we hope he recovers up quickly.
I'm all for it.
For anybody themselves who's struggling, there's help available everywhere. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be, have that courage to go talk to people. It's really good. Craig Overton comes in, which we'll address later in terms of the balance of the side.
Yeah.
And Rishabh Pant is back.
Rishabh Pant is back, and he should be playing. There's no reason why he wouldn't be playing. So I think that's pretty sorted on India's end.
Yep. All in all, it's promising to be a really good Test series. I'm excited. Test cricket's always the purest form of the game, but from a fantasy point of view, it's really exciting because you have to think on day one about what might happen on day 5, and that makes the scenario very interesting for me. I think it adds nuance to the game.
And I was just thinking about it in terms of, the average fantasy player, myself included. We play a lot of fantasy cricket when it's ODIs or especially T20s, and the churn rate in those sort of tournaments is very quick. You'll have 1 or 2 matches a day. You're making teams constantly. When it comes to Test cricket, guys, you're making one team that's going to last you for 5 days. And
it's going to last you for 2 days if it's played in Ahmedabad. But
that's true. Or if it's Indian batsman in Adelaide.
Yeah.
So I mean, but 2 days is still longer, right? And you have to keep that in mind. How are you going to see your team perform over 5 days rather than just sort of top loading it with what you see happening in the first couple of days?
Yeah. Well, okay. That's a nice little point that we can use to launch into our discussion. I know we've had a couple of discussions, obviously, before the show, as is our want as wannabe successful podcast producers. We want to try getting you good content, so we try to discuss these things in advance. I want to start off with actually what I've written down as point 4. I'm going to ruin the complete schedule that we've got and go on with point 1.
No worries, let's do it.
Cricket's back at Trent Bridge. Test cricket is back at Trent Bridge for the first time since 2018, since India played England, since Rishabh Pant made his Test debut. It's a great ground. I think we're in agreement that it's probably the most batting-friendly ground. What's your view on Trent Bridge?
Trent Bridge is the most batting-friendly ground in England. So if we just look at some quick statistics, Joe Root averages 62 at Trent Bridge. Virat Kohli averages 52. Ajinkya Rahane 42. Cheteshwar Pujara 45. These are big numbers. Josh Butler 52. These are big numbers there. I mean, a lot of these guys have batting averages in recent times have been falling, and these numbers stay up despite that. Trent Bridge, even in limited overs cricket, has some very big totals put on. So
now the value is staying up, so that is quite important.
Yeah,
I think one thing to take into consideration as well is with the likes of some of the Indian batsmen that we've mentioned. I think they've gone away and had good performances outside of
Mm.
outside of Trent Bridge as well. We'll touch upon that when we dive deeper into player selections and specific players. But when you've got batsmen who have been averaging well on pitches that are more difficult to bat on, coming into a place like Trent Bridge, where, as we've said, it's more batting friendly,
Hmm.
that's really a positive to look at for this first test. It's
Yes, that's true. Having said that, Indian batsmen do tend to underperform in the first match of any Test series. The infamous Adelaide 36 all out comes to mind, but really you go back and you look at any Test series, the first match, Indian batsmen don't do well. So,
But I think, as I guess the takeaway from this mini discussion about Trent Bridge is that because Trent Bridge is the first ground of this series,
yeah,
when we're picking a team for this match, we are perhaps going against the grain for
true.
what you would do for Test cricket, certainly in England, which
Yes.
is which is we're not going to pick bowlers and bowling all rounders predominantly. We're actually going to pick batsmen and maybe batting all rounders,
Absolutely.
and that's where we think we're going to get the points.
That's certainly true, Nick, because if you think about where the points are coming from in test match fantasy cricket, they're mostly coming from your bowlers, pure bowlers, and bowling all rounders. And then the wicket keepers come next. But it's really the bowlers who are giving you the points. So, yeah, you've touched upon that accurately. Now, I'll just throw a quick statistic to back you up to your point about Trent Bridge. Now, Mohammad Shami averages 65.5 at Trent Bridge, and that's pretty bad. Ishan Sharma averages 37.4. He's played 3 matches there. So these are not good looking statistics. On the flip side, Broad and Anderson, they've played a ton of matches there, and they're doing pretty well, both hovering around 20.
I think most cricket fans will always remember the Stuart Broad Trent Bridge spell against Australia. That one
True.
sticks in the memory. Let's have this discussion. It's been a discussion in England in England amongst English cricket fans, amongst selectors for about a year now, a year and a half.
Yeah.
Broad or Anderson, or Broad and Anderson. What is, from a fantasy point of view? I think it's pretty clear. From a fantasy point of view, you want both of them
It's a
playing.
no-brainer. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think what it means is that when you're obviously, as we've said on our insights episode, you've got until a minute or so before the match kicks off to pick your team. So make sure you're checking. I think it's a case of if they're both playing, they both have to be picked.
Definitely. So, Nick, I was going to touch upon this as we go through our team's
Sure.
recommendations. Being the stats guy, self-appointed, Nick-appointed stats guy for this
Yeah.
podcast, I've sort of devised a new weighted points, smart value method for every player, impact points. And when I'm looking at Broad, Anderson, and Jasprit Bumrah in England, I expect them to be the highest fantasy point scorers. So
Okay.
so I
Okay. No,
mean,
that makes total
it's
sense.
a long test series, Nick. It's 5 test matches. So and these guys aren't getting any younger. So I'd be surprised if they played in all 5 test matches. But maybe in the
Yep.
first match they start with both of them.
Well, I'm going to give you one player that I think for England, and I think you'll agree with me, will play all 5 Test matches, particularly
Hmm.
with Ben Stokes becoming unavailable, and that's
Yeah,
Sam Curran.
I think he will play. He'll play every match. He should play every match. Um, we saw versus India in that series in 2018. He played 4 matches, batting average of 39, a bowling average of 23. He had some match-winning knocks, bowling performances there. It's just the impact that he brings to the side. Even if you look at last 3 years in Test cricket, he doesn't play every match in a series, but the England side do bring him in from time to time.
Yeah,
And in the 18 matches that he's played, um, the 9 matches that he's played, he's averaging about 23 with the ball and 30 with the bat. Now any team will take that hands down.
yeah. Azza, what I like about Sam Curran from a fantasy point of view, aside
Yeah.
from the fact that he's picking up batting and bowling points, is players like Sam Curran. He's a bit like a player like a Rishabh Pant or a Jadeja if you're looking at an Indian side.
Mm.
Um, is that you don't have to look at the statistics to know that it's a good pick. You've seen them when you watch the game itself. You feel the impact that these players have. Sometimes players like a Dom Sibley or a Pujara, for example. Yes, they get
Yeah.
because they get the ugly runs, and it's rude to maybe call it that, but I don't particularly enjoy watching Dom Sibley bat. But
Mm.
he gets the runs. For example,
Yeah.
he might get a 60 odd playing really not pleasant to watch cricket. But unless because it falls from the memory, unless you look at the statistics and say, well, okay, maybe Dom Sibley has good stats, so that might push me to pick him. But
Yeah.
players like Sam Curran, players like Ravi Jadeja, you can pick them in fantasy cricket knowing that, listen, they pass the eye test as well. I don't have to be so worried about what numbers are they producing, what are they showing. Um,
Look, I agree with you as a cricket fan. As a fantasy fan, I'm also agreeing with you because the numbers back them up. When
yeah,
you're playing cricket over 5 days or let's say 2 innings, these kind of players have so much opportunity to show their talent, which might not happen in a 20-over match where they just don't get to bat. For example, they just bowl 2 overs because of the conditions. In a 5 day test match, these players and their quality really shines through, and we see that in sort of the statistics as well.
yeah. Well, we talked about a couple of England bowlers. We talked about an England all-rounder. I want to
Yeah,
touch upon an England batsman before we dive into perhaps looking at India, and then eventually we'll get into our teams.
yeah.
Uh, from a batting point of view, at the top of the order, I think England have a very interesting conundrum now
Mm.
with Hasib Hamid.
Do you reckon Hasib Hamid might play at three?
No, I think Zach Crawley is for now the number 3 pick for England.
Mm. That's
Um,
interesting.
I personally think Rory Burns, out of the two openers, Rory Burns is the more certainty. Is the bigger certainty. Is the greater
Yeah,
certainty.
certainly. Yeah,
Uh, and I think it's basically a toss up between Dom Sibley, who I've already gone on record to say I don't enjoy watching his batting technique,
yeah,
which, sorry, not sorry,
yeah.
versus Hasib Hamid, who, you know, he's this is his second chance. It's a rebirth. He's a completely different player from when he debuted against India. I think
Mm.
2016 it was, or
It
something
was,
like that.
yes.
He's off the back of a good 100. When he scores runs, he scores runs for fun, and he's got potential. The question is, this is perhaps not a fantasy related thing, but if you're tuning in only for the fantasy and you don't like our other analysis, well, tough. We're going to do some other stuff as well, and I just want to say from a just a general cricket point of view, he's a player that you might need to invest in. You're going to have to say, listen, he might not fire in the first test. Let's pick him and see how he does in
Yeah.
5 tests.
It depends if he plays. I think I'd be tempted to pick him. But would I pick him over? So when I'm looking at England batsmen, Joe Root gets a look in automatically.
Yeah.
And then my second batsman was actually going to be Rory Burns. And then I'm not sure if I have space for a third batsman like Asif Hamid.
Yeah.
So I would recommend against it just for that reason. There's a lot of other talent that's proven talent on offer for this first test match.
And we'll be touching upon this a little bit later when we dive into our teams. And I know we've got a couple of differences,
Yeah.
Hasib Hamid being one of them. So it's interesting though, because from what I'm understanding, Azza, you're reluctant to pick too many England batsmen, right? You really have Joe Root and Rory Burns as your England batsman,
Yes.
which would then mean that you have more of your batting coming from India. So why don't we
Well,
dive into
not necessarily, but let's just dive into it.
let's
Yeah.
just dive into India then. Let's
Yeah.
have a chat about India. It's what everybody who
Yeah.
tunes into this podcast, 90%
Yeah.
of you playing fantasy cricket in India. You want to hear
Yeah.
this?
And I'm an Indian cricket fan, so I mean I watch them more closely than any other team. But I've also looked at the statistics. So, well, Virat Kohli, I think he's proven himself in the previous tour in England. Of course, when you look at his statistics in England, just keep in mind that he had the worst tour, worst poor run of form of his life in 2014 when he toured there. So
I
it's
mean,
really,
that was painful to watch.
it
I mean,
was,
it was
yeah,
very enjoyable to watch as an England fan. Don't get me wrong.
yeah, yeah.
But
And he's also gone on record and said that he had mental health issues after that series. So that's really how badly it affected him.
yeah,
So I think we all know about that. But then the way he performed in 2018, just uh, it's really a flood and famine kind of situation there with Kohli. But having said that, I've also looked at, for this particular series and this match, I've looked at the last 3 years in SENA, the South Africa, England, New Zealand, Australia, and West Indies, Indian batsmen's performances there. And Virat Kohli averages the highest in the last 3 years, so that's from January 2018. He's averaging about 42. Now, just keep in mind, Nick, and I'm going to say it once here, that in fantasy cricket, batting average, I'm not sure that's a great metric.
right.
Because batting average will tell you how well they do in a given innings. But what I'm more interested in is runs per match. So now, if I look at Kohli's runs per match, it comes to about 82 in SENA countries, and that's pretty good. It's really the highest for any Indian batsman, and just yeah, it's Kohli, and in England it's about 73. So that's 82 fantasy points that you get just for his runs, not accounting for his boundaries, sixes, hundreds, fifties, the
No, and I
bonuses.
think the last series in England, although it was all those, it's now 3 years ago,
Yeah,
almost to the day that they last played in Trent Bridge, for example. That's proved to everyone, not least Kohli himself, that he can bat and score runs in England. So
yeah,
that fear now of, am I picking someone who's going to lose me points? Am I picking Virat Kohli who's going to edge the fifth ball off of Jimmy Anderson to second slip and get me negative points? That's not something that is necessarily a worry
no,
anymore. It's not an
not
automatic
necessarily.
dismissal, right?
Yeah,
It's not Johnny Bairstow walking out to Akshar Patel and Ahmedabad where you think, well, here go more fantasy points, I'm going to lose.
yeah. If you want to have negative points, you do that. You pick Johnny Bairstow and Ahmedabad.
No, you'd pick. I'm actually of the opinion picking Johnny Bairstow is going to be negative points if you do
That's
pick
what
him.
I'm saying. Yeah, if you're,
Even at Trent Bridge, I think.
I
I
don't think
mean, I
he's
know
going
we
to play.
touched upon England. I don't think he's going to play. It speaks of a desperation from England that Johnny
Yeah,
Bairstow keeps on coming in and out. And I know Ben Folkes is injured, and there
yeah.
are no other options. But
Well,
I digress. I like talking about England a
can I
lot.
just can I just expand on that digression very quickly?
Yeah,
Something very interesting that I know you will find interesting and the listeners will find interesting. Johnny Bairstow's batting average versus India in England at home is lower than Stuart Broad's batting average against India at home. It's 25.5 versus 26.9. So that's about 26 versus 27.
so basically the numbers don't add up.
Yeah,
The form doesn't add up. Again, at the risk of being a armchair analyst, which I think I firmly am, his technique
yeah.
doesn't really measure up to red ball cricket.
I don't think
Um,
so.
so yeah, but that's why JB is cricket info like to call him. But let's go back onto the India train. We've spoken about Virat Kohli.
Hold on.
Nat,
If they call Johnny Bairstow JB, what do they call Joss Butler?
no, they call him YJB. I think
Oh,
it's
cool.
young, not young Johnny Bairstow. Yorkshire's Johnny Bairstow. One of the two. It must be one of the two. I
Yeah,
don't know.
probably
We'll have
Yorkshire.
to we'd have to send out a message and
Yeah.
hopefully we get a response.
Or maybe they're listening and they let us know.
If they're listening, then they can like, comment, subscribe. That's
Yeah.
that'd be nice. Cheeky little follow.
Yeah.
Uh, speaking of cheeky, there's absolutely no correlation with the segue, but I'm going to run with it. Speaking of cheeky, whenever it's Test cricket, you have to look at cheeky Cheteshwar. Pujara's there. He's always
Yeah.
a solid player. I think he's almost always a first pick or a certain pick when you're playing fantasy cricket and India's involved, wherever
Yeah.
it is.
So in my team, I've gone for him, and I think he's probably the second best Indian batsman, pure batsman after Kohli in the last 2 years in SENA countries. So that's just why I went for him. There's nothing to say that he's not going to perform well. His numbers in England are a bit worrisome. He's played 10 matches there, so that's a large enough sample size, and he averages a paltry 27.5. I'm not a fan of that, but that's also an older Cheteshwar Pujara. I think after that 2018 series in Australia, Pujara has been just a different player. So I'm going
He's
to bank
very
on him.
much he's also very much that kind of batsman that his importance isn't just in the runs that he can get; it's the pressure that he soaks up.
Yeah,
And he allows then other players at other ends to be more free. If he's soaking up the pressure, if Broad and Anderson can't get a wicket off of him, if Mark
yeah,
Wood's coming steaming in and he can't get a wicket off of him, then on
yeah,
the other end, they're going to try to be more expansive. They're going to try something different. And if you're a Virat Kohli or a KL Rahul, Rishabh Pant, you can be a bit more free because
yeah,
you will be able to put the bowlers under pressure because they're already under pressure. So I think
yeah. So you're getting
Pujara's
more
a
fantasy
great
points from those guys, basically.
exactly.
Yeah,
He's almost, and I don't know if this exists as a concept, but I'm gonna create it now as a concept. He's kind of an enabler in fantasy cricket. He enables
yeah,
those around him. He's a good pick from a fantasy cricket point of view because
yeah.
his points lead to other players getting points.
Yeah, so I agree, and even the points that he's giving you they're not less. I mean, he's
Yeah, yeah.
expected points that I expect are about 70
Okay.
from
Well,
Pujara. So it's not bad. It's sort of middle of the road, but yeah, he's more certain to give you those points than someone else, say a Rishabh Pant.
yep. Well, lastly, I suppose we touch upon the Indian bowling. It's
Yeah,
not the 2000s, so there is genuine fast bowling quality in the Indian
one
side.
of the best fast bowling attacks in the world at the moment.
Yep, I think that's safe to say. Certainly
Yeah,
one of the best bowlers in the last 5 years in all forms of cricket. That is
yeah,
for sure, with in the form of Jasprit Bumrah.
true,
Um,
true.
what's your take on the Indian attack then?
Well, can I touch upon Jasprit Bumrah and and Ishant Sharma simultaneously? Because there's a lot of discussion about how Bumrah's probably in the Fab Four of the fast bowlers, but it's really Ishant Sharma who's shining through there with an average bowling average in SENA countries of 20.1,
Yeah,
20.2.
that's pretty nuts.
Yeah. Now, bowling average is not the best metric in fantasy cricket. What's a better metric is wickets per match because you're getting points for every
Yep.
wicket. And there, Ishant Sharma is at about a 4 in SENA countries, whereas Jasprit Bumrah is about a 4.4. So, it's really Bumrah might be a little less economical, but that's why his average is higher, but he's striking more often. And so both of them very good picks. At Trent Bridge, I'd be tempted to go for Ishant over Bumrah because he,
Okay.
he he has that sort of he's bowled a lot of his career in flat tracks on flat tracks where he has that workhorse like ability really to come in over after over and keep the pressure on.
You mentioned that. That's very interesting
Yeah,
because for the same reason why not for the same reason. You've talked about Trent Bridge being flat. We've talked about Trent Bridge being flat, and we're saying that okay, that's a reason for Ishant maybe to go over Jasprit because of the way that he's used to bowling on flat pitches. I
yeah,
go the opposite way. I pick Jasprit Bumrah over Ishant Sharma in that
right.
scenario, and I also think of that's why I have Mark Wood in my thinking, particularly if Broad and Anderson are not playing, because I think
Mm.
when you've got pitchers that aren't doing much and you have bowlers who can bowl at 90 miles an hour, they can make something happen.
Yeah.
And I think when you've got swing and other skills on top of that, you can't be ignored.
I think there's definite merit to what you're saying. In an ideal world, if you would pick Bumrah and Ishant, Broad and Anderson,
Yeah.
that would be your ideal fantasy bowling lineup.
So I mean, we're going to get to that
Yeah,
because I would probably swap out Ishant with Mark Wood, but that's more
right.
of a gut feeling and a little bit based on his recent performances.
Yeah,
But all right,
fair.
what I want you to do now, Azza, is just list out your playing 11, and
Yeah,
I'll list out mine, and then we can have a discussion on where we disagree, and let's try to come together and give the listeners, the viewers, the
yeah.
consumers of our brilliant content um, an 11 perhaps that they should look at picking.
Good, good. So pay attention now, kids, because I'm going to be reciting off some cricketers.
Nice.
And there's going to be 11 of them, starting from the wicket keepers. Now, I pick Rishabh Pant and Joss Butler. Interestingly, Joss Butler is probably the best England batsman at home in recent times, even better than Joe Root, I might say. So I pick Butler and Pant. Now my batters are the Indian batters I've gone for are Kohli and Pujara. The English batsmen are Root and Rory Burns, as I casually mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
I expect Rory Burns to be the other England batsman who can guarantee me with a higher degree of confidence some runs and hence points. Um, Now all rounders, very interesting. Ravindra Jadeja and Sam Curran. I've gone for two all rounders. Um,
Yep.
I've not got Ravichandran Ashwin there, who is, keep in mind, an all rounder in the apps. He's not listed
Yep.
as a bowler. So I've not gone for Ashwin, I've gone for Jadeja and Sam
He's
Curran.
not just an all-rounder in the apps. Thank you very much. I think he calls himself an all-rounder.
Ashwin, yes. He's gone on record to say that he feels like he's more of a natural batsman than a bowler.
Oh, well, there you go.
So there you go. Having said that, he doesn't seem to average very well batting wise in SINA countries at about 18. So that's the issue there. And that was a big factor in my thinking because in the last 3 years, Jadeja has averaged about 41
Yep.
in SINA countries. Keep in mind there's a lot of not outs there as well, but that's neither here nor there. So that's my all-rounders, Jadeja and Karan. Now I've picked three bowlers, Ishant, Bumrah, and Broad. Now, just a caveat there, Broad is if Anderson doesn't play, but if Anderson does play and Broad doesn't play, then I pick Anderson.
Right.
And if they both play, then we will discuss that in a bit.
Yep. Captain, vice captain choices.
Captain Stuart Broad, vice captain Sam Curran.
Okay. What's your thinking behind that? Why Broad? I think Sam Curran maybe speaks for himself a little bit, but why Stuart Broad?
Stuart Broad has one of the highest expected points according to my Genius points system.
Yeah, I mean, so you've basically made up your own system to justify your own arguments.
Exactly.
No,
But he's giving me about 150. The one who's higher than him is Ollie Robinson, but that's just because there's not enough data points on him.
Yeah, well, we're not going to talk about Ollie Robinson. I don't think he's going to get a look into the side. He's coming back. Let's avoid the Ollie Robinson topic for another day. We don't have enough viewers or listeners for there to be angry responses, but there might be. So let's touch away from that. I'm going to quickly give you my 11 then. So my 11's looking like similar. Joss Butler, Rishabh Pant.
Mm-hmm.
Picking two wicket keepers, picking them obviously both because I think they'll be getting wicket keeping points for catches, but also their numbers are good with the bats. Virat Kohli, Pujara. That's standard.
Yep.
Joe Root as well. Here's difference number one. I'm backing Hasib Hamid. I think
fair enough.
He's played well this season. He's in form. He's batted against a similar attack to the one India will be fielding. I think that's got to count for something. I pick Hasib Hamid as my batsman. Difference number 2, I go for Ravi Ashwin over Ravi Jadeja.
Okay.
In the all-rounder slot for India. Whilst you're right, Sir Jadu is much better with the bat,
Yeah.
particularly in sort of overseas conditions outside
Yeah.
of the subcontinent.
Yeah.
I feel that Ashwin's bowling counts for a lot, and
So
go on.
I'll just quickly debate you there. Uh, Jadeja's bowling average in Sina countries last 3 years, 27.9. Ashwin, 28.2. Not a big difference, but Jaddu is slightly lower. Wickets per match, you're looking at about 3.3 for Jaddu and 3.6 for Ashwin. So parity, really.
So then that's where you're saying the runs will make a difference.
Yeah.
I respectfully disagree. I this is where I think you and I differ in terms of fantasy approach. This is where different people, when they're playing My 11 Circle, Dream 11, whatever you
Yeah.
use, this is where they differ when they're playing against friends, against others. I'm looking at also recent performances. I think Ravi Ashwin's been bowling well. He's bowled beautifully in the county circuit. Got a couple of decent wickets, decent bowling
True.
performances for Surrey. I'm going to back Ravi Ashwin. I think he is particularly against a perhaps more inexperienced England batting lineup. I think they'll struggle more against an Ashwin who can be more unorthodox than they would against a Ravi Jadeja.
Yeah, I
But
suppose it depends as well how many left-handers that England are going to play.
yep,
If they're packing their batting order with left-handers, then Ashwin is a pick over Jaddu.
is a pick, sure.
Yeah,
I go Jimmy Anderson,
yeah,
not Stuart Broad, not Ishant Sharma.
hmm
Although, as stated, it's Anderson or Broad, depending on who England pick.
yes.
If both Anderson and Broad are playing, then I drop Hamid probably,
And then you're also playing Mark Wood, aren't you?
and I'm also playing Mark Wood,
Yeah.
and
Quick.
Jasprit Bumrah as my last bowler. So let's quickly look at this. Right,
Yeah.
we want to have a quick discussion. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players that we agree on. Right,
Yeah.
we need to find another 4.
So what are we trying to do? Why do we need to find 4 more?
We want to give the viewers an 11, right? We
Okay.
want to
A
give them
joint
content.
TFCP 11.
We want the lazy people to basically skip to the end,
Okay.
to this last like 2 minutes where they can skip to the end, listen to
Yeah.
us, make their points, and then
Yeah.
send us angry messages that they've lost.
I'm going to quickly say something interesting that I've just thought about, Nick. Very interesting. Okay. Now, the large contests on these fantasy apps, I'm not an economist, but I have been looking into this in game theory. They are a mix of a negative sum game and a zero sum game. Now, all of this is going to tie in very well to what you were just saying, but I'm just interested in this. Okay. Now, just pay attention because it gets interesting. Now, just imagine a casino where you go to play blackjack or a roulette, or one of those games where if you're smart enough, you know that the house is always going to come out on top if you have enough sample sizes. So you're always going to be losing money. The casino is always going to be winning. That's just how it works. So but if you go to a casino and you go to play poker, now poker is the only game where you're playing against other people. You're not playing against the casino. And this is where the analogy in fantasy cricket versus betting comes in. In fantasy cricket, you're playing against other fantasy cricketers, and when you're betting against the house because that's where they're setting the odds, and you're betting against the odds that they set. Now, if we give them the viewers, the listeners, an 11, and every listener was to pick the same 11, the fantasy app will suddenly go into a bit of a chaos. So it's very interesting.
Right. So, provided we still have listeners after your discourse into economics and game theory,
Yeah.
the bottom line is what you could have said in about a sentence and a half
Yeah.
is fantasy cricket is a game of skill. It's not a game of luck. It's not a game of chance. But
Yeah.
because it's a game of skill being played against other people who have access to the same resources, sometimes picking what is a cookie cutter kind of approach is not always the best.
Yeah.
It's important to be unique. It's important to be different. It's important to take risks. With that in mind, we're going to disregard all of that and give you our 11 that we think
Yeah.
is going to be the best for
Cool.
this match.
And we're going to assume that both Broad and Anderson are both playing, are we?
Let's go with the assumption they're both playing because I strongly
Yeah.
let me sound very mysterious and say I have reasons to think, maybe implying that I've got some contacts in the English game. I have nobody that I know in the English cricket system, but I've just got a gut feeling that they'll both play. Maybe I'm reading too much. Broad has been on the 100 coverage. He seems to think the way he's been speaking, I seem to think both him and Jimmy are going to be bowling. So let's go with the assumption that we've got one. That's two bowlers sorted out.
Yeah. So we've got the wicket keepers as well.
Yeah, we've got wicket keepers are sorted. We've got Virat Kohli, Pujara, Joe Root as our batsmen.
Yeah,
now,
just those three.
I'm willing to drop Mark Wood and have Stuart Broad come in there.
Yeah.
And keep another English batsman because we're at Trent Bridge.
Right. So that means you're looking at dropping Ishant Sharma or Jasprit Bumrah. And knowing what we've said so far, you're going to be dropping Sharma.
I would, yeah. My three bowlers, if Broad is playing as well, Broad and Anderson both playing, my bowling lineup is going to be Bumrah, Anderson, Broad.
Fair enough. I don't see why I would want to argue with that. I think Bumrah is the more wicket-taking option. So, yeah, fair enough.
Okay, and then
we're going for the all-rounders?
So that's the debate. Sam Curran is an automatic pick for both of us.
Is the pick, yeah. And I'm happy to say that Ashwin probably looks like the better option. Well, I'm not. I would still pick a Jadeja on my team, but Ashwin, it's a toss up. But let's go for Ashwin.
Let's go for Ashwin. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think that sounds good. And I think that the last point is the trickiest one: Rory Burns or Hamid.
Rory Burns, Nick. He's looked good in recent times. He decent average, 36 odd. Modern times, it's not half bad.
So we're not. We don't want to look too much into Hamid's recent performance against in the practice match or generally his performances in county cricket recently.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because if we were to say we're looking at Hamid's performance recently, then we also might want to look at KL Rahul or someone. So
yep, no, that's true, and we haven't even touched upon KL Rahul.
There's a bunch of players. Yeah, we haven't. And we've not mentioned Rohit Sharma's ability to score quick runs. We've not mentioned Mohammad Shami being one of the most unlucky bowlers or having one of the most unlucky spells.
Let's be honest, Rohit Sharma's a flat track bully. Don't have me, bro.
He's a flat track bully. He's a person with a flat track bully's technique, but with a much more refined cricketing brain than that.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Some fancy editing or something, or if you're a listener, you will manually click through. This is the part where I'm summarizing our joint Fantasy Cricket Podcast 11. It's going to be Josh Butler, Rishabh Pant. We're playing two wicketkeepers. We've got Virat Kohli, Rory Burns, Cheteshwar Pujara, Joe Root. Right, those are our batsmen.
Yep.
In our all-rounder picks, we're going with Ashwin shading Jadeja, but if you went for Jadeja, that would also be a good shout. Mm-hmm. Sam Curran 100% as the other all-rounder pick. We're going with the assumption that both Broad and Anderson will play, so our bowling lineup is looking like three seamers, which is Broad, Anderson, and Bumrah.
And Bumrah, yeah.
Captain and vice captain. What are your picks?
I'd pick Sam Curran as my captain in this kind of scenario.
Yep, I agree.
And maybe Stuart Broad as vice captain.
Okay, so I go Jimmy Anderson as vice captain. That's my difference there.
I just go to abroad because he sometimes whacks the cricket ball, hits a lot of sixes, and then suddenly will give you a 50 at the tail.
Okay, no, that's true. He will give you more. He'll give you
Yeah,
more batting points for sure. So I
yeah,
think okay, I think there's merit in giving him
yeah.
the vice captaincy, perhaps
Although,
over Anderson.
yeah, yeah,
And he's
and
playing at home.
he's
He's playing
playing
at
at home.
home. He bowls. He's had great spells at Trent Bridge.
Yeah,
Well, Jimmy Anderson's got a very good Trent Bridge record.
very good indeed. His bowling average of 19.6. Broad doesn't look paltry in comparison either. It's 22.2, but Jimmy at Trent Bridge, it's something else really.
Yeah, and
He's giving you
Jimmy at Trent Bridge. Let me pull up your statistics quickly.
Jimmy at Trent Bridge is giving you 6.4 wickets per match.
6.4 wickets a match. I mean, I think that shades it for me. Also, bearing in mind, Stuart Broad isn't the batsman he used to be after he was smacked in the face by, I think it was Mohammad Shami, right, or Varun Aaron. It was Varun Aaron all those years ago. He's not really been the same batsman since. So I would go with Jimmy Anderson as vice captain, but Stuart Broad, Jimmy Anderson again. It's a fairly even pick.
Yeah.
I think that's it, Azza. It's been a longer podcast
Yeah.
than our viewers and listeners are used to.
Yeah.
If you've got an inability to pay attention for this long, I do apologize. You can listen to this over the course of over a few days. You don't have to listen to it all in one go.
True.
Give us some feedback. Tell me why I'm wrong about my picks. Tell Azza why he's wrong about his picks. Support the channel.
Also support your arguments if you're telling me I'm wrong.
I mean, that goes without saying. Azza, you are generally wrong. Let's be honest. You can't just hide behind numbers all the time. Sometimes the cricket guts got to come out. I think we're in for a good series. I think it's going to be really interesting. It's going to be exciting. Test cricket's fun. Test cricket's great. Let's hope the weather holds up. And I'm looking forward to it. I think on that note, we'll ask you as always, like, comment, subscribe, share it with people, share it with potential sponsors, share it with everybody. Put it on for the dog while you go out for a walk.
I'd say share it with your uncle who's a cricket nerd and ask him what he thinks of this. Yeah,
exactly. All our links are included in wherever you're listening to this, as is a Patreon. We're happy to keep doing this. We're enjoying what we're doing, but support would really be useful. And on that note, Azza, I'm going to say thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick.
It's been fun. I know we're going to have quite a bit of banter going on back and forth. My first test prediction is England's going to absolutely roll through. I think there's going to be a phenomenal bowling performance from England.
Unfortunately, I agree with you.
And I think there's going to be some scarring, which might lead to changes in the second test. But we'll see you all next week when we do the second test preview.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Azza. Cheers.